Yes, so hi, welcome everyone. My name's Chris. Quick question for the audience here. I know you're all very busy, but one of the things I wanted to understand is who loves installing SDKs and installing containers as a developer? This guy, okay. Awesome. Well, you're at the right talk because we're going to be talking about how to simplify the developer experience today. I'm also joined by Brent Burgess, and I'll let Brent introduce himself shortly from Macquarie Group and how they've solved that challenge. So we're going to run through today, what do we mean by multi-cloud? So we talked about the multi-cloud developer experience, but what do we mean by multi-cloud? How do we make that experience a bit easier for our developers to build? And what are some of the challenges with building across multiple clouds and actually as a developer in general? We're going to hear how Macquarie Group has solved that problem, and then we're going to hear some of the learnings and some of the impact that's had on that organisation. I'm also going to share some links where you'll be able to see more details about what I've touched on today, but also some other approaches that you can actually learn from. Great, so what do we mean by multi-cloud? It's pretty simple. It means using one or more clouds to achieve some sort of purpose and deploy services. We're really going to be talking about the developer experience of that today. So what are some of the challenges with running in multi-cloud, right? You may have had to run in multi-cloud for a number of reasons. Maybe there's some functions or services that you want to use from different cloud providers. Maybe you've had acquisitions, and then also you could be looking at using tools from vendors that may be on different clouds as well. So what we're talking, so how do we approach that from the AWS perspective? We very much put it into a people, process, and technology perspective. I guess generally people mostly focus on technology, but there is the people and process component of it today. There's a number of frameworks out there that talk about how to operate in multi-cloud, so definitely check those out as you get into that process. So let's talk about specifically challenges for the developer, right? So when we look at IDEs, when the developer rocks up to their IDE and starts wanting to provide some business value, they have to install an IDE that's all of our organizations have way more than one. We've got VS Code, Kiro, Claude for Code, all those sorts of things. You have to configure that in your personal way. You may have to configure some things for your organization about how the code is formatted, camel case or whatnot. And then you've also got to do Windows versus Mac and all these sorts of things that we have to sort out. So there's one challenge right there, just getting the IDE right. You start thinking about enterprises where they've got multiple identities across different clouds, technologies, all those sorts of things. They've got network access to understand, so they might need to connect to the development databases. Then they've got to manage their secrets, so SSH keys to access different environments. They've also got a bunch of tools on their desktop that they'll need to interact with. So Docker is obviously a very one front of mind. They'll have to interact with Artifactory or some sort of CI/CD. And these are all things that the developer will have to configure. Now what we've added into the mix recently, and we've seen an explosion on, and we're all here at reInvent, we've heard there's actually a talk on right next door talking about the AI augmentation of the developer experience. How do we set those tools up in a secure way that may need to meet guardrails and things that your organization has? So there's some of the challenges we've got here. I'm going to hand over now to Brent, who's going to talk about how Macquarie has dealt with some of these challenges and some of the innovation that they've done to help.
Alrighty, thanks Chris. Yes, I'm Brent Burgess. I work for Macquarie Group. So today I'll just talk a little bit about Macquarie and who we are and what we do. And then I'll talk about what we've done to effectively accelerate the engineering experience at Macquarie. And so Macquarie Group, we're a global financial services organisation. We operate in 31 different countries. We have roughly 20,000 employees globally. And we're a very diverse financial services organisation. So we have an asset management group, we have a capital management group, trading. We also have a retail bank. So we have a full end-to-end retail bank in Australia. It's a digital-only bank. So no branches, no ATMs. That's a very diverse set of customers and clients that we need to service globally. We've had a cloud-first strategy for the best part of 11 years. And our cloud strategy is really about driving innovation and agility so we can deliver outcomes for our clients and customers at speed. And at this point in time, we're about 70%, over 70% of all of our infrastructure and applications are hosted in public cloud. And so more recently, our multi-cloud strategy, again, that multi-cloud strategy is about delivering innovation and agility to the business. So we're in both AWS and GCP. We have well over 80 services enabled for our application engineers to leverage in order to deliver value and applications to our customers and clients. In the last year, we've had 2 out of 3 of every engineer either certified or trained in public cloud, and we have well over 1,000 applications hosted natively in public cloud. So as I said, what does multi-cloud mean to Macquarie? It is about driving innovation and agility. It's about the best of breed services through the cloud services providers so our application engineers can deliver value and outcomes to our customers and clients. But what does that bring? That brings multiple tool sets, different environments. You think about the different parts of our business, whether it's asset management, capital management, trading, a digital bank, core banking. They're all very diverse and different platforms that our application engineers are working on. With that brings a diverse set of frameworks and languages. So frameworks are always changing, they're always upgrading. The languages that we use, predominantly Python, Java, Go, Ruby. So we have to support all of those different languages and the associated frameworks across a global diverse business. And of course that requires a broad skill set. So our engineers have to be multifaceted. They have to be capable of working on different tools and different platforms in order to service the demands of our business. And of course, again, that's in the context of an organisation that operates in 31 different countries, 20,000 employees, and multiple different markets. So our vision at Macquarie is to create a place where engineers thrive. And so what do we mean by that? We want to empower our developers. We want to give them the best tools, the sharpest tools, the best laptops, the best frameworks, the latest languages in order for them to deliver outcomes for our customers and our clients. We want to accelerate delivery. We want to keep our engineers focused on business problems as opposed to some of the challenges Chris spoke about at the start. So whether that's SSH keys, access to Artifactory, are you in the right AD group? Do you have the right tools and frameworks installed on your laptop? We want to take the vast majority of that complexity away from our engineers so they can focus on accelerating delivery for our customers and clients. And again, that really just enables us to deliver business outcomes at scale across a globally diverse business. And so how do we do that? We've built a platform that we call Dext. So that's our developer experience daemon. It's based on Microsoft's dev containers. And I'll walk you through a few examples of how that works. And then I'll give you a real world example of how we've enabled multi-cloud development using the Dext platform. And so what does Dext do? It's about rapid onboarding. It's taking away the complexity of whether you're in a particular AD group, have you authenticated with Artifactory, do you have Docker installed, is the sidecar running, all of the frameworks and tools that you need locally in order to be productive on day one. It's about providing that paved path. So rather than having a multitude of different environment setups for each engineer within the same team, we have these consistent environments so we can manage and support them at a global scale. And then being a global financial services company, we are regulated in multiple markets. We have our own internal control frameworks and security requirements. And so what we do is we try to shift left all of those compliance controls and frameworks into the engineering experience on the local laptop, as opposed to dealing with them later in the development cycle as you approach production. And again, all of this is about keeping our engineers and our developers in flow for longer, focused on business outcomes rather than wrestling with the setup of their development environment. So what does it look like? So every engineer has the Dext daemon installed automatically on their laptop. And when they go to localhost in their browser, you're presented with this really visually appealing dashboard with all of the configuration traffic light. And so if you are missing a configuration or something's not right, you can actually click on the traffic light and Dex will do one of two things. It'll either fix it automatically or it'll send you directly to the documentation so you can set up your configuration. So you can authenticate with Artifactory or make sure you're in the correct AD group or have access to our control plane. And so that's really reducing the setup of the engineering experience and environment on the local laptop. And so once you've got the green traffic light for all of the configuration that's required to start writing software, we then provide you with a default set of dev containers or images that you can base your dev container on. And so as I said, we have a multitude of diverse tools and frameworks. We deploy multiple operating systems into the cloud environment for the different types of applications that we build. Once you've selected the base image for your dev container, we then present you with tens of different pre-baked templates for the types of applications, tools and frameworks that you need to build the software or the applications that meet the business problem that you're working on. And for you, those of you in the audience that have a keen eye, you'll notice that we have both the AWS and GCP frameworks as a template to accelerate that multi-cloud service enablement on day one. So let's see if I can bring it to life with an actual real-world example of how we do multi-cloud enablement at Macquarie. So the way we think about multi-cloud enablement at Macquarie is two aspects. We have our service builders, so those cloud engineers that are enabling multi-cloud services for the consumption by our application teams or our service consumers. So on the service builders side, we have a pre-baked template within Dext that installs all of the framework components so that our engineers can start enabling services across multiple cloud providers. So we install or provide a stripped-down version of Kubernetes, Crossplane, Argo, Local Stack, and Moto. So we've shifted left the service enablement, the cloud engineering, so our engineers can use the power of their laptops rather than having to make changes locally and push them up into a shared development environment. When we first started on our multi-cloud journey, we were pretty fast, but it was only a handful of engineers. And our changes rarely conflicted with one another. But as the team grew, we found that this shared development environment, we were working on the same compositions to enable the same services, we would often conflict. And so what we've done now is by shifting that entire stack, providing that in framework in the developer container, we can do most of the engineering effort before going anywhere near a shared environment. So that's really accelerated the enablement of services on multiple cloud providers. And then on the service consuming side, and again, no presentation would be complete without mentioning AI. What we're doing is we're pre-training a model with all of the services that we've enabled on each of the clouds so that as a service consumer inside your IDE, you can generate a cross-plane claim which is compliant based on the services that we've previously enabled. So again, that's really accelerated both the service enablement and the service consumption so that our engineers worry less about the controls and guardrails around each service that we've enabled, but leveraging those multi-cloud services so they can deliver value to our customers and our clients. And so what's the business outcome of Dext at Macquarie? So rapid onboarding, I've spoken about this at length. It really does reduce the onboarding of engineers down from days and sometimes weeks. It's not until a week or two later that you find that you're missing an SSH key or you're not in the correct AD group to leverage a particular service that we have internally. And so it's not just about rapid onboarding of new developers or engineers, but often people will swap teams. And when you swap teams, it's almost like starting in a whole new company. You have to learn how that team works and what tools and frameworks that they use. This accelerates the movement of engineers so they can work on different parts or different applications, even in different divisions far more rapidly than what they have in the past. And again, shifted left, all of the configuration, leveraging the power of the laptop so that our engineers, particularly with multi-cloud, can focus on enabling services rapidly to meet the expectations of our business and spending more time in flow. And then finally, it's about velocity. So enabling the best of breed multi-cloud services so that our engineers can deliver value and outcomes to our business at scale. And then ultimately, empowering our engineers to thrive.
Thanks, Brent.
Chris.
Yeah, thank you. And look, thanks for running through that, Brent. It is really interesting. And just a couple of questions that came to mind for me was, how long did it take to build an experience like that for your developers? Was it something that happened over years, or is it something that's happened quite quickly?
Yeah, so it's taken us a few years just to build up the base capability. So we looked at the highest value, where was most of the toil in the engineering setup, and then we've been progressively building out each of those base images to the point now we have tens of templates. Yep. And then we also have an inner sourcing model where engineers can contribute to the platform. Perfect. So the actual multi-cloud service enablement or service builder template came from one of the cloud engineers.
Got you. So it's sort of grown out, scratching an itch and turned into the platform that 1,000 engineers are using now. Great. And I mean, on that, how many people support that platform now? Given that you've got 1,000+ engineers, as you said.
Yeah, we have thousands of engineers dispersed globally, and there's one person supporting the platform.
Great. Okay, so it kind of runs itself to some extent.
Yep.
Probably that one person doesn't say that, but like it. And with AI tools coming in, and I guess you talked about flow of the developer. How are you using Dex to interact, or how are you seeing developers interact with your internal tools? We saw on the screenshot there a couple of internal McQuary tools there. Are you using Dex with MCPs or something like that to augment the developer experience or make it easier for them to work?
Yeah, of course. So obviously we've enabled the AWS MCP servers, but we're also using it for our own platform. So our cloud control plane is quite it's very mature. It's been running for the best part of 11 years. And some of the things that we're looking to do, again, it's about reducing cycle time and increasing velocity. So we're MCPs that have been looking at some of the build failures. And so as an engineer, I can sit in my development environment. If I'm looking to consume a service, I can use the chat window, and then the MCP will go and determine and often give us back the correction to the claim because it knows based on previous examples.
Oh, very nice. Oh, that's great. Well, thanks, Brent, for sharing all that with us. That's been super interesting. And look, I just wanted to touch on a couple of other talks that are along a similar track. So if you found this interesting, definitely check out the Adobe's session. It will be available on YouTube within sort of 48 hours of the presentations there as well, so you can check it out when you get home. Now, I did promise to share some links with you, so here's the QR codes for that. The top two are the AWS multi-cloud pages, but probably the most interesting one here, in my view, is the Macquarie engineering blog. There will be a blog post coming around Dex, so looking forward to seeing that. But there's a bunch of other really great content on there about how they manage their control plane that Brent touched on, and also their secrets management and a few things like that. So definitely check that out. Brent also mentioned that they used development containers. And that's the link there to that as well. So that's a really interesting tool that we've seen many developers pick up. So with that, we'll wrap up there. We'll be over here. So if you've got any questions afterwards, please feel free to come over. And it'd be great if we could get some feedback in the survey that's part of the app as well. So with that, we'll wrap up there. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.